Today, we're going to talk about something that's running behind the scenes in pretty much every office you've ever worked in: Active Directory. And the best way to think about it is as the digital brain of the entire organization. To really get why, let's start with a question about your own workday.
So just think about it for a second. Every day, you log into your computer, right? You open up a shared file, you send something to the printer. But have you ever actually stopped to wonder, what's making all that possible? Who or what is giving you the green light to do all that, while maybe your coworker from a different department can't?
Well, the answer is Active Directory. It's this centralized service from Microsoft that's basically the command and control center for the whole network. It really is the digital brain that knows who you are, manages what you're allowed to see and do, and just keeps the entire IT world organized and secure.
So, to really get a handle on how this works, we've got to look inside this digital brain. We're going to peek under the hood and check out its basic anatomy. Okay, so the most fundamental piece of Active Directory is what's called the domain. The easiest way to picture a domain is as the brain's main territory, kind of like its neighborhood. It's just a logical group of all the people, all the computers, and all the devices that have to play by the same set of rules and share the same central database. Now, if the domain is the territory, then the domain controller, or DC, is the brain's active nerve center. This thing is a powerhouse server, and it is always working. It's the part that checks your password when you log in. It's what confirms you have permission to open that spreadsheet, and it holds a full copy of the directory's entire memory. You know, a big company can't just have everyone and everything dumped into one giant pile. That would be chaos. So the brain organizes things into departments. And in the AD world, these are called organizational units, or OUs. It's actually a pretty brilliant way to group users and computers to match the company's real-life structure. It makes it way easier to manage permissions for, say, the entire finance team all at once. So what's actually inside all these OUs and domains? Well, they're filled with things called objects. And an object is, well, it's anything the directory needs to keep track of. You, as a user, you're an object. Your computer is an object. Even that printer down the hall is an object. And each one has its own specific details, like your username or your computer's operating system, all stored like individual little memories inside the brain. All right, so now we know the structure, let's get into what this brain actually does. Its two main jobs are, 1, acting as a gatekeeper to check your ID, and 2, acting as a rulebook to enforce all the company policies. So every single morning, whether you know it or not, you do this secure digital handshake called Kerberos. It sounds really complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. First, you prove who you are with your password. The domain controller then gives you a special temporary pass for the day. You can think of it like a master key. Then, anytime you want to get into a resource, like a file server, you show that master key to get a very specific ticket just for that one thing. The DC checks it out, hands you the ticket, and boom, you're in. And all of this happens in the blink of an eye every single time. And this right here is a really important distinction to get. Kerberos, that's the gatekeeper. Its only job is authentication, proving you are who you say you are so you can get through the door. But once you're inside, a totally different system kicks in: group policy. This is the rule book. It doesn't care who you are anymore. It only cares about what you're allowed to do. And this is where group policy really shows up in your day-to-day work life. You ever have new software just magically appear on your computer overnight? Yep, that was probably group policy. Ever been forced to create one of those super complicated passwords? That's group policy. Can't change your desktop background to a picture of your dog? You guessed it, that's the rulebook, group policy, doing its thing. Okay, so this whole system works great for a single office, right? But what about those huge global corporations? Well, Active Directory was built to scale. Let's take a look at how this digital brain grows to handle all that complexity. So as the company gets bigger, it might need to create a bunch of related domains. Maybe the sales team in Europe gets its own domain, for example. When you have a collection of these related domains, all sharing a part of their name, they form what's called a tree. So sales.company.local and hr.company.local would both be branches on the bigger company.local tree. Makes sense, right? Now let's zoom out one more level to the forest. This is the biggest container of them all. A forest is simply a collection of one or more of those trees we just talked about. Everything inside a single forest shares a common blueprint, and by default, they all trust each other. It basically represents the entire digital identity of the whole organization.
So how do all these different domains and forests actually talk to each other? They do it through something called trusts. A trust is, well, it's kind of like a diplomatic agreement between them. It's a configured relationship that lets a user in, say, the European sales domain securely use a printer that's physically in the North American headquarters domain. It's the absolute key to making collaboration work across a huge company.
Okay, let's pull all this together. Why is having this one central digital brain so incredibly important for, well, pretty much every modern business out there? But here's a fun fact. This whole amazing brain can't do a single thing without one other critical piece: DNS, the domain name system. If Active Directory is the brain, then DNS is the network's address book. It's how your computer knows where to find the domain controllers in the first place. Without DNS, the brain is just completely lost and has no way to talk to anything. So when you put it all together, the benefits are just crystal clear. You get centralized management with one place to control everything. You get this incredibly strong security model. It can scale from a tiny little office to a global giant, and it's flexible enough to perfectly mirror your real-world company structure. And what's really crucial today, it has evolved to connect right into cloud services like Microsoft's Azure AD.
And that brings us to our final thought. For decades, this digital brain has lived on servers humming away in a back office or some data center. But as more and more of our work moves to the cloud, the whole idea of a local network is kind of disappearing. So the big question for the future is this: how does this brain continue to evolve when it no longer has a physical home, but has to live entirely online?